Hi everyone and welcome to Osama Rat Care. So the video I'm going to do today is going to be all about supplements and specifically looking at the kind of supplements that you would feed in addition to a normal kind of mix. And when I say a normal mix, I mean the kind of mix that I talk about in the simple mix and the complex mix. And also different supplements that I tend to use fairly regularly to give you a bit of a feel for the kind of things and why we give them. So the first kind of supplements I'm going to talk about are general vitamins and minerals supplements, and these are given when a diet is lacking in certain vitamins and minerals to kind of boost them up. So when do you decide whether you're going to give them? There's lots of different kinds of foods out there. I personally favour a homemade mix, as you can probably tell from my previous videos, but there are the kind of mixes you can buy in shops, and the vast majority of the ones that if you go down to your local pet shop, or to be honest most of the stuff online, unless you're talking about rat rations in the UK, these are going to be what we call enriched mix, or what I call enriched mix. So this means that they've got added vitamins and minerals to them. What normally happens in the manufacturing process, either those little biscuity bits that you see in them, they sometimes have vitamins added in the production process, or in other times they will spray the mix as a whole with kind of a vitamin enriched spray, which will then stick and kind of be imbibed by the rats when they eat it. The reason they do this is because rats generally eat mostly grain-based diets. I mean, there's other bits and pieces in there, but the vast majority of things in there is grains. And that means that it's naturally going to be short in certain vitamins and minerals. And those are typically things like vitamin D, vitamin A, oh no, sorry, not vitamin A, so calcium, copper, vitamin K in theory, though that's generally made up if you feed a bit of veg regularly, so that's quite an easy one to tackle. But those kind of three, what we call the big three, vitamins and minerals, vitamin D, copper and calcium, are deficient in a grain-based diet, and that's fine. The rats still need them though, so you need to get them in some way. And it's one of those questions that I thought about a little bit in the early days when we started looking at making our own what we call straight space mix, is how the wild rats get them. But in reality, wild rats will scavenge a lot, they'll catch insects, they'll be out in the sunlight. Even a certain amount of sunlight exposure could help top up vitamin D, for instance, which is by far the hardest to get into a diet otherwise. But also wild rats don't live as long as ours, so actually being slightly deficient in certain vitamins is probably not going to cause some major issues because they've not got that long life to see the effects. But if you do have your pet rats and you don't feed one of these naturally enriched diets, it's something that should be quite important to you, because vitamin deficiencies will shorten the lives of your rats and cause various health problems. And so it's something that I know personally, because in the very early days of straight space mix, when we didn't realise that vitamin D in particular was so important, one of my rats actually broke its front teeth, and it's like, rats don't break the front teeth. He fell, he didn't fall particularly far. I've had rats fall that far and really not be bothered, and he broke both his front teeth. It turns out his teeth were quite brittle because vitamin D helps the body kind of process and use calcium, so he was actually also calcium deficient, hence his brittle teeth. It's something we didn't realise, but it hadn't shown up because we hadn't had young rats on that diet at that stage. It's still very early days. So ever since, it's something I've been very conscious of, because vitamin D deficiency can cause problems in later life. So that little boy ended up getting hind leg degeneration far earlier than I would have seen it in other rats. And it's interesting that that kind of symptom you can see in children that are raised on a low vitamin D kind of diet, kept in the dark a lot, for instance, don't get out and about. They kind of generally have nervous degeneration and problems later in life, so it's a very real issue that you need to be aware of. So when do you need to supplement? So we talked about you don't need to with your normal enriched kind of diet. When you do need to start thinking about it is, so if you make your own mix, if you're feeding a mix that is mostly one of these enriched diets, so say my simple mix, that is half Harrison's banana brunch, which has a lot of the vitamins and minerals added. It's a bit rubbish for copper, but I talk about that in the video and how you can meet that requirement in the mix. You're also using a dog kibble. Dog kibble is full of vitamins and minerals. It's an enriched food. In fact, it's quite high in copper, which is really handy to offset some of the other issues, as is barley rings or conditioning pellets. That's why you use them in there. So what you're basically doing in that mix, plus human breakfast cereals have a lot of vitamins and minerals added. In itself, on their own, they wouldn't be enough to meet a rat's diet, but when you mix it in with the kind of enriched mix and the kibble, you get a diet that's actually pretty good. You don't have to worry too much. If you're really, really worrying, you might think about it for kind of young or pregnant rats, but in reality, you're covering most of the bases there. If you feed a decent kind of vegetables alongside a couple of times a week, say dark green leafy veg being particularly good, occasional wet meals and so on, then you'll be covering everything. So if you're doing something that's based on a kind of an enriched shop-bought kind of rabbit food, rat food, that kind of thing as your base, you're probably okay, you don't need a supplement. So the time you do need to supplement is when you're feeding what we call a straight space mixed. So a straight space mix uses grains that have just kind of pure grains, so like groats or paddy rice or things like this, even kind of dried rice. They're things that don't have added vitamins and minerals to them. You'll typically buy them kind of as single grains, and you'll notice on the package they've got no added vitamins to the ingredients. It's literally just a single ingredient, which is why we call them straight. They're just what they say on the tin. They're just oat groats, they're just paddy rice, they're just barley and so on. So if you feed one of those, a mix that is based on that kind of diet, so that includes one you mix yourself or one you buy from rat rations, so like number 7 is a straight space mix, number 11, and so most of those numbers are. The only difference is the ISA mixes, which are half and half an enriched mix, half a straight space mix, so you actually need to feed half the kind of supplements that you would do for a full straight space mixed. So straight space mix, you do need to supplement, and you need to be supplementing the big 3, so vitamin D, calcium, copper. There are a couple of really easy ways to do this. You kind of find one that suits you. So one thing that rat rations do, and they did specifically for this, is they introduced something called Daily Rat 3. This is basically, let's have a bit of zoom in there, copper, calcium and vitamin D. And it's kind of the daily allowances in there. Rats could have this every day, but in actual fact they don't really need it every day, because there is some in the straight space mix. You are adding some things containing those vitamins, but what you generally find is if you're feeding, let's say 3-4 times a day on a straight space diet with this, then you'll be pretty safe. So this is not water soluble, which is a shame, but you can sprinkle it over a wet meal and mix it in, which is how I feed it occasionally. Or you can actually sometimes get it to stick to veg. I've heard of people, like if they're feeding kale and it's a little bit damp, it sticks quite well to that if they sprinkle it on it. I've also baked it into treats for them before. I really should do a recipe of baked treats at some point. Not that I do it very often, but that is one of the ways. I like to keep that one in. Anytime I do a wet meal, I'll sprinkle a bit on. You don't have to just do the day's dose, so when I do it I tend to put a couple days dose in there per rat, because I don't like to supplement like many days, and as long as they're getting over the course of, let's say, about a week, 10 days, they're getting all the vitamins they need, that they can work with that. They don't need an exact dose every single day. So the other way of doing things, and this is the way I actually tend to prefer, is Daily Essentials and Calcivet. So these are sold normally under the Dr. S or Dr. Squiggles range, but you can actually also get, as you can see here, Croc Doc. I think there's a bird version of it, which I've forgotten the name of, but they're all the same thing, and they'll all be called Daily Essentials 1 and Calcivet. So these are both water soluble, so you can put them in water, which is why I tend to prefer them, because it's quite easy and the rats really like it. You put in some of the Daily Essentials 1, it tells you how much in there, and then a bit of the Calcivet. Put them both in at once, because they don't like the Calcivet on its own, but they'll usually take it with this. If they're not keen of it in a water bottle, try offering it in a bowl. Mine don't like it in a bottle. It seems to kind of make the tube go manky, so they don't like the flavour then, but they'll drink it all in a bowl very quickly. So then you just make that up in the water bottle and do that again for a straight space mix 2 to 3 times a week. Or you use a mixture of the two. You might do that on one day, those on 2 days, or another day. So you don't have to get too hung up about just doing one method. That's why I keep both in, because it's quite handy. But you'll find what suits you and your rats best. So that's only needed if you're doing a straight space mixed, and that is 2 to 3 times a week. So is a mix, as I mentioned, that's half and half. You still need to supplement. You've got more of a chance if you want to do it by natural foods, but to be fair, you're probably still safer to supplement. But because it is half a commercial mix and half a straight space mix, then you only have to do it half the time. So 1 or 2 days supplements, whether you do it by Daily Rat 3 or whether you do it by the Dr. Squiggles and Calcivet, and you do need both Dr. Squiggles and Calcivet, because Calcivet adds a bit of calcium and a bit of extra vitamin D, and the Dr. Squiggles has copper and vitamin D in it and various other bits and bobs, but those kind of work very well. So those are the kind of main supplements that I offer, and that's how I would go about supplementing a typical dry mix. And what I do see a lot of is people thinking that they must supplement every day forever. And I will say, if you're supplementing with calcium, so your Calcivet or your Daily Rat 3, rats actually need a break. They need a day off a week in order to process the calcium, otherwise they can become calcium deficient despite having loads of calcium thrown at them. So just bear that in mind and be a little bit sensible and give them at least one day off a week of the Calcivet. Technically the Dr. Squiggles stuff they can have every day. It is, I'm pretty sure, fairly full of sugar though, which is why it's rat crack and they go mad for it. So I probably wouldn't offer it every day unless it was the kind of really hot weather or the rat was ill and not drinking. It's actually great to offer to rats that are not feeling great because they will usually drink it. Mix it with a bit of milk for a real treat. Coconut milk, particularly, my rats have got absolutely nuts over that. You can even make it up into ice cubes for summer. But yes, so those are kind of different things you can think of with the Dr. Squiggles. So that's doing mixes. What I will say is there are ways to go about that are alternatives to this. This is the easiest way because you use 1 or 2 of those and you're covered. You've covered all your rats, you don't have to worry about it. You can do a certain amount with food. So copper is quite a straightforward thing to kind of top up. Cooked liver has absolutely loads of copper in. You can't give that very often because it's very high in vitamin A as well. But you can give them kind of a bit of cooked liver maybe once a week. Great source of copper. You can make them liver treats. There's some lovely recipes out there. In fact, there's a really good one on the Scuttling Gourmet that's a book, by the way, but that's got a really good recipe for liver biscuits that my rats go crazy for when I can be bothered making it because I'm lazy. But yeah, make a batch, freeze it up, little squares, love it. Or liver paste, which I use to kind of tempt my pregnant mums off the nest, or hive medicine. So they're good sources. You can also, so vitamin D, if you're struggling to get something like this, particularly not if you're not based in the UK, so you can have a look for human vitamin D tablets, crush them up. Typically for a rat you're talking about 1/10 of a human dose for most things, as a good guide. And of course you can do that for calcium and copper as well, but I haven't really found that many copper tablets and it's a bit faffy, but effectively you can make your own Daily Rat 3 with that. Just by crushing the tablets, mixing them together, and yeah, I'll show you that again, but that is quite a good guide of the kind of ratios that we're looking at. So that's one way of doing it. There's also cod liver oil is a really good source of vitamin D. The problem is it's also a really good source of vitamin A, so you can't give it very often. They used to do, and they may still do, I think 7C's used to do a vitamin A extracted cod liver oil, and you can check, if you check on the ingredients, you can see whether it's got vitamin A in it or not. If it doesn't say vitamin A on there, then you're okay, and you can actually give that kind of like give one of those little tablets a week to them, and they go absolutely mad for cod liver oil tablets. I have nearly lost a finger once because apparently once you've been touching one of those, your finger smells like, and it's a very similar texture to a cod liver oil capsule. So be careful offering it to them, but they do like it. Salmon oil is quite high again, but is also high in vitamin A, so again you need to be a little bit careful with that. Trying to think, calcium bones, cuttlefish, pumice stone, all of these go down very well with my rats. So I do still quite often, even though I am giving them some kind of general supplements, I do quite often give them something to chew in the cage. They've pretty much all got pumice blocks actually, which they do quite enjoy, weirdly enough. Cuttlefish they sometimes like, sometimes just poo on. But with that kind of stuff you don't have the same worry as you do with the liquid calcium supplement because it's not as easily absorbed, so you don't have to have that like not in the cage a day a week. They don't chew it that often, but they'll chew it if they need it, which is quite a nice way of doing it. I'm trying to think other ways. Probably cover copper. The other thing that's good for copper is dark green leafy veg, but it's not as high as some stuff. Or dried mushrooms, actually, gram per gram, they're incredibly high in copper. Not quite as high as liver, nothing's as high as liver, but it's, you know, it's reasonable. But you can think about those things. There is also, I think, vitamin D drops that's sold for humans again, so that could be quite an easy way, because you could mix that with water or with wet food. The powder you have to generally mix with wet foods. But yeah, so that should give you an idea, and that's what you should think about in terms of supplements when you're kind of doing a mix that is at least part straight-based or fully straight-based. But again, don't worry about it if you're feeding an enriched diet already. So that's it from me in terms of kind of normal dietary supplements and mixed supplements. I'll probably have a quick stop and film another video on some of the other supplements that I use, just to make this not too long for people.